Well, welcome to the Bible and Science Lesson 11, the dating game, Part 1. And so, Sandy, I'm not sure where the handouts are, but they'll turn up, I'm sure. So last week we finished up the Age of the Creation. That was a 3-part series, and we now go into the dating game, a cute little name, but we're really looking at dating methods, in particular radiometric dating this week, and then carbon-14 dating week after next. So I won't be here next week. We'll be out of town. So a week off from me, that'll probably be good for you. But we'll go from radiometric dating tonight to carbon-14 dating, which is another form of radiometric dating, although much shorter time frames in view the week I get back. And then we'll move into a 4-week study on the creation, the curse, and the catastrophe. You can't hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Maybe I'm doing this. Maybe I'll just stand right here. Okay, I'm good? Okay, perfect. So working definitions tonight. 3, science, and we've looked at that almost every week. The geologic column, that's a new one, and radiometric dating. And again, by radiometric dating or radioisotope dating, we'll be looking at all methods, or principally those methods outside of carbon-14, which we'll deal with in 2 weeks. So we've said every week almost that science is knowledge about the natural world that is based on facts learned through experiments and observation. So as we talk about radiometric dating tonight, the pushing question, the question I will keep having for you, is this scientific? Is this arrived at scientifically? So over the last 3 weeks, we've seen that the Bible teaches a young creation. We spent 3 weeks looking at all the evidence, or not all the evidence, a lot of evidence on a young creation. We saw, as you look at Genesis, from creation to Joseph dying in Egypt was 2,309 years. It's easy to pull that straight into the New Testament. In Luke, you have the genealogy from Adam to Christ. In Matthew, you have the genealogy from Abraham to Christ. But keep in mind, Joseph was one of Jacob's sons. So we have perfect overlap with Old Testament genealogy, New Testament genealogy. We end up with a creation that's greater than 6,000 years, but less than 7,000. And again, we've been using this. The flood was definitely 1,656 years after the creation. And then those other numbers are, we're within 100 or 2 for sure. But again, what we end up is a creation that, according to the Bible, is young, greater than 6,000, less than 7,000. We've said this the last few weeks, but it bears repeating, especially tonight. Science does not produce ages, and we're going to be looking at radiometric dating, which claims to be able to produce an absolute age. If we push science for the age of people or things, we must remember that it has limitations. 1, it can only produce a min, max, or range. So a lot of times when they tell you, well, this is 4.5 billion years old, they're really sloughing through a lot of material and just giving you a number, because anytime you're using science to produce an age, it's either a min, max, or a range. With that min, max, or range, there are assumptions. As you violate those assumptions, that range can become slightly erroneous to completely wrong. And so you'll see that tonight as this plays out. As we've looked at various forms of evidence from the creation, we found a great deal of evidence that points to a creation that cannot be 4.5 billion years old. So in lightning round fashion, I'll just remind you of some of the things we looked at. Mercury's magnetic field, thousands, not billions. Mercury's magnetic field decay rate, thousands, not billions. Earth's magnetic field decay rate, thousands, not billions. Our moon's still geographically active, thousands, not billions. Our moon is receding from our planet, at best 1.5 million, not billions. Comets, in particular short duration comets, thousands, not billions. Our sun, the faint sun paradox, maybe a million, not billions. Fresh tissue, bone cells, and even DNA in dinosaur bones, thousands, not billions. Time for coal formation and the fact that coal carbon dates, thousands, not billions. Time for oil formation, thousands, not billions. We can form oil in the lab very quickly. We saw it form in nature instantaneously. Time for diamond formation and the fact that we've carbon dated 8 different diamonds, thousands, not billions. Times for fossils to form very rapidly, pointing to thousands, not billions. The lost squadron in the Greenland ice cap. Again, we could create that ice cap in less than 2,000 years, thousands, not millions or billions. The oldest tree, thousands, not billions or millions. Stalactite and stalagmite formation, very rapid, thousands. The helium in our atmosphere points to a very young atmosphere, thousands, not millions or billions. Intact DNA found in insects. We didn't get to look at that last week, but thousands, not billions. Chemical level in our oceans, thousands, not billions. 51 different elements, none of them point to billions of years. The sodium level in our ocean, at best, millions, not billions. Erosion of the continents, at best, millions, not billions. C4 mud accumulation, at best, millions, not billions. Written history, thousands. Agriculture, thousands. The number of ancient graves, thousands. The evidence is overwhelming for a young creation. So the legitimate question you may have is, well, what is the evidence for an old creation, Rich? If all this is the young, where's the old? Well, it principally comes from two places. The geologic column, which is how they often date fossils. We'll talk about that tonight. And radiometric dating, or as I told you, the absolute age produced from a radioisotope date. Now, we're not talking about carbon-14 dating. We'll talk about that in 2 weeks. So first, before we break these two topics apart, the geographic, the column and radiometric dating, I want to show you the real problem in a study. At the end of these two video sections, I'm going to ask you the question. They came to the conclusion that the volcanic ash they were dating and the products underneath the ash were 1.75 million years old. My question for you as you watch this presentation of how this played out, is this scientific? This next clip is from Creation Magazine Live. It'll be 2 clips. I'll talk between them. Richard Fangram and Calvin Smith.
Welcome to Creation Magazine Live. My name is Richard Fangram.
I'm Calvin Smith.
Now our topic this week is radiometric backflips. How solid are these dates really? Interesting topic. Now popular myth is that radioactive dating methods confirm the geologic timescale and the concept of human evolution. The methods appear so impressive that many Christians accept them as evidence that the Earth is very old. We're going to expose this myth today by doing a study of the dating of the East African KBS tuff strata and the famous fossil 1470, KNMER 1470. That stands for Kenyan National Museum, East Rudolph. Now you'll have to follow along carefully here to see all the evolutionary assumptions, but you'll get them. Just pay close attention.
Richard Leakey, son of famed paleoanthropologist Louis and Mary Leakey, visited the fossil deposits east of Lake Rudolph, which is now Lake Turkana, in northern Kenya in 1967. He immediately organized an expedition to search for hominid fossils. That's what his family does. And the most important fossil discovered there is KNMER 1470. Skull 1470 is modern in appearance, but was originally estimated by Richard Leakey to be about 2.9 million years old.
Okay. One early geologist with Richard Leakey at East Rudolph was Kay Behrensmeyer, seeking to unravel the geology of the area. She discovered a volcanic layer of ash or tuff that became known as the Kay Behrensmeyer site, the KBS tuff. If the KBS tuff were anywhere else, no one would give it a second thought. However, at East Rudolph, it is of utmost importance. First, human fossils and artifacts, tools, cannot usually be dated radiometrically, but they can be at the KBS tuff. It contains radioactive potassium-40, which decays into argon-40. Second, artifacts have been found in association with the KBS tuff.
So the assumption is that the tuff gives an estimate of the age of the stone tools. Found there, right? So third, hundreds of Homo and Australopithecine fossils have been found above and below the KBS tuff. So the date of the tuff becomes a maximum age for fossils found and a minimum for fossils below it. Now the first attempt to date the KBS tuff was in 1969, well before the discovery of the skull, 1470. Richard Leakey supplied rock samples to F.J. Fitch from Birkbeck College and University of London, and J.A. Miller from Cambridge University, both recognized authorities in potassium-argon dating. Now, Fitch and Miller's first analysis gave evolutionary dates from 212 to 230 million years of age. Concerning this, they said, from these results, it was clear that an extraneous argon age discrepancy was present. Well, wait a sec. I thought you stuff in a machine and whatever it came out to be, that's what the date was. How did they know there was a problem? Well, the Associated Fossils told them there was a problem.
So, in spite of our being assured that dating methods constitute independent confirmation of evolutionary dates, Associated Fossils had already determined the acceptable date ranges, and the dates fell outside of those ranges, and because of that, they were considered wrong. Now, based on their alleged evolution, the Australopithecine and other mammalian fossils found beneath the KBS tuff had determined that the rock should be between 2 and 5 million years old. The dates of 212 to 230 million years were way off. Without the associated fossils, however, there would be no way for an evolutionary geologist to know if the dates were good dates or bad dates. Big problem here. Under other circumstances and without fossils to guide them, evolutionary geologists would have accepted those dates as good.
They would have, so to speak. Fitch and Miller requested new samples. From these they concluded from pumice lumps and feldspar crystals that the age of the KBS tuff was 2.61 million years. It was because Lincoln found 1470 below this tuff after it had been dated at 2.61 million years, and above rock dated at 3.18 million that he estimated that the skull was then 2.9 million years old. So you can see how evolutionary assumptions can overrule so-called absolute dating methods. That one's very easy to see. We're going to show you some more examples of that. People need to get out of their head that, the scientists said it must be fact. And more when we come back.
Okay, so let's review real quick before we advance this story. So the KBS tuff, they're doing studies on this tuff, and they potassium-argon date this volcanic ash flow, and it comes back to 212 to 230 million years old. But that's deemed as unacceptable and contaminated. Why? Because they had already detected Australopithecine, that's Lucy, that's monkey, fossils that can't date that old, that wouldn't be that old. So in spite of a scientific absolute date, they've already determined what the acceptable date range is, and when the date goes way out of that, let's just do it again. So that's exactly what happens. That date is rejected, and more samples are set off. Well, good news, the next samples come back between 2 and 5 million years old, like they were shooting for. Keep in mind at this point, the Homo skull has not been found. So a date of 3 million, 4 million, that's all fine for these monkey bones, and the Homo skull has not been found yet. What is more than likely the human skull has not been found yet. So right now, everything is fine. It's 2 to 5, everybody's happy. So let's pick up the story.
Right. In 1972, before Skull 1470 was announced, Vincent Maglio from Princeton University published in Nature a chronology of the hominid-bearing sediments east of Lake Rudolph, which included the KBS tuff that we've been talking about. His work was based on the lineages of 2 species of pig and 1 of elephant. Maglio's dates were compatible with the radiometric date arrived at by Fitch and Miller of 2 to 5 million years old, something like that, and were considered to confirm their date. In 1974, a third chronology of the area was published in Nature based on paleomagnetism. The conclusion was 2.7 to 3 million years old. And that seemed to represent a bullseye for the correlation of various dating methods. So there's a bit more information.
So by late 1974, the KBS tuff had been dated 5 different times by 4 different dating methods. The alleged compatibility of the different methods would seem to be a geologist's dream. However, under the surface, the Skull 1470 with its estimated age of 2.9 million years presented the evolutionary world with an intolerable situation here.
The theory of human evolution did not allow for a skull so modern to be that old. Nevertheless, Richard Leakey continued to fight for his original date. If Skull 1470 was 2.9 million years old, then he had discovered the oldest member of the genus Homo. If it wasn't, he hadn't. Hence, he resisted lowering the age of the skull.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, another study by G.H. Curtis and his associates from the University of California, Berkeley, claimed to distinguish two tough units. One gave an age of 1.6 million years, and the other, where skull 1470 was found, gave 1.82 million years. Both considerably younger than the five previous studies had reported.
Right? Okay. All of the previously cited articles spoke of the great difficulty in getting rock or crystal samples that were not altered, weathered, or derived from older rock. The question comes up here. How does one know when one has good samples for dating? Well, the answer seems to be that good samples give dates in accordance with evolutionary presuppositions. Bad samples give dates not in conformity with evolution. The classic case of circular reasoning here. This is what we're talking about.
On March 20th, 1980, two more dating studies criticized the earlier work and claimed the age of the KBS Tough was 1.87 or 1.89 million. Then in late 1981, Ian McDougall published his study of the KBS Tough, giving a date of 1.88. At that point, the 10-year controversy over the date of the KBS Tough came to a close with agreement on the more recent date.
Although the dating of the KBS Tough appeared to have been settled in 1980 and 81 by conformity of different dating methods, the controversy was actually settled in 1975 by the pigs.
Donald Johansen tells of attending the 1975 Bishop Conference on Anthropology and Geology in London. Major paper was presented by Basil Cook from Dalhousie University in Halifax, who'd studied the pig sequences in southern Ethiopia, and at Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. According to Cook, the dating at Lake Turkana was too high by about 800,000 years. The pigs at Turkana told him so.
Donald Johansen is the paleoanthropologist made famous for discovering Lucy, in case you don't know that. He wrote of this conference, he said this, nearly everyone, but the Lake Turkana team, that would be Richard Leakey and his associates, went away convinced that the KBS Tough and Skull 1470 dates would have to be corrected.
Not Leakey, though, because he wanted. But the astounding thing about the whole affair was that the anthropologists were rejecting the same objective scientific data that they universally appealed to. There was internal consistency within the study and high conformity by five different dating techniques. The main thing the dates did not conform to was the concept of evolution of pigs and humans, not their own system. We'll be back and talk more about this in a moment.
So in 1972, pig lineage studies put the tough between 2 to 5 million years. It gets better. I'll tell the end of the story. By 74, we had 5 different studies that had locked it into 3.3 million years. It was 3 million years old. That was until we found that skull. That hominid skull could not be 3 million years old. It would have turned human evolution, which we don't believe in, is not true. It's a completely fabricated device, but it would have turned it on its head in 1 minute. It could not be 3, but good news, they were able to get some new dates that took it down to 1.6 to 1.8, 2 more dates in 1980, 1.87 to 1.89, another one in 1981, 1.88. But at the end, the tuft is now dated at 1.75 million years old. You know why? That's the date the pig lineage has determined. 11 different radiometric absolute dates, and in the end, the date of this volcanic ash flow is dated off the evolution, supposed evolution, of pigs. So much for absolute dates. That started, by the way, at 230 million and worked their way down to 1.6. You'll love this quote from O'Rourke. This is what you saw tonight. The rocks do date the fossils, but the fossils date the rocks more accurately. Let me fix that for you. Radiometrically dating the rocks does date the fossils, but dating the fossils does a better job of dating the rocks. Now the question you should have is, okay, how are the fossils being dated? If radiometric dating the rocks isn't the right thing, how are the fossils being dated? Are they being radiometric dated? No, they are not. So before we move on, I'll ask you this question. The presentation you just heard just about the KBS Tough, and this works out all over the place, is this scientific? Or is this working to an age and then realizing, oh, that won't work, we just found a hominid skull, and working to another age? That's what we saw tonight. So how do they date fossils? Well, I told you last week or week before that every fossil we've done carbon-14 dating on has returned a carbon-14 date because it's living organic material. I told you that carbon-14 datings can never go beyond 100,000 years. It's carbon-14 deplete at that. So the question would be, well, how are they dating these pig teeth at 1.7 million years old? Well, they do it from the geologic column. What? Let me read. So the geologic column is a theoretical classification system for the layers of rocks and fossils that make up the Earth's crust. I gave you a cute little cartoon picture of it. Some fossiliferous, that means fossil-containing layers, can often be traced across entire continents, that's true, and correlated with rocks in other countries, that's true. In such cases, these layers have been given names and assigned dates. So I gave you a cute little diagram. You can see the eras, and you can see the geologic periods and the time frame given to those periods. Well, who did that, and when was that done? That's a legitimate question. This is another picture of the column, and according to this textbook, it says this: fossils are really dated by their position in the geologic column, rarely by any radiometric dating method. Well, wait a minute. Then how did we get the geologic column? That's a fantastic question. I'm glad you asked that. So let's look at James Hutton, 1726 to 1797, but in 1795 put together the first geologic column. Now, do you think we had radiometric dating in 1795? Absolutely not. Charles Lyell picked up that geologic column and expanded on his work and created those 12 layers you see in your picture. That came out in his book, Principles of Geology, in 1830. Do you think we had radiometric dating in 1830? Of course not. Next, Lyell and others worked out those strata dates in the early 19th century before very much was known about rock strata and their fossils. The strata they studied was in England, Scotland, and France primarily. Lyell based his age theory on the number of still living species that he found in each strata. He made up these ranges out of whole cloth. It has since been established that Lyell's theory does not agree with reality. The percentage of still living species is very, very high throughout all the strata. And the strata itself varies from place to place, and even the order varies. So we will find places where the strata is missing or where the strata is in different orders than what Lyell and Hutton's work shows us and tells us it should be. As you saw in the KBS, that should be tough. I'm not sure about that T there. Tough video. The dates also come from evolutionary ideas about the descent of man and other mammals and have nothing to do with any dating technique. It is important for us to understand that this entire column is made up. No real evidence to support it, no dating of any kind, to put it simply, on limited observations in the early 19th century, 1830, it was made up. Here's another example of it out of a textbook. Here we are in the 21st century, slave to a man-made geologic column in 1830. Now, I do want to show you something that happens to be interesting about this. On the geologic column, there are index fossils. And an index fossil means when you find this animal, you know what age you're working with in the strata. On this particular picture, it has one of those index fossils right here. His name, it looks like coelacanth, is actually coelacanth. If you found a coelacanth, if you read over, that meant you were working in strata that was 320 million years old. That's when they went extinct. So if you found this very ugly looking fish called a coelacanth, you knew you would hit pay dirt at 320 million years old. That wasn't until 1938. When we found one, then we went on to find a whole bunch of them. In fact, you can go swimming with the coelacanths. In fact, you can even buy one and keep it in your aquarium. Well, as you might imagine, the coelacanth has been moved off the index fossil listing, along with other animals that we've found since then. But this is just the shenanigans that go on with these supposed precise old age methods. You'll love, this is O'Rourke again. Radiometric dating would not have been feasible if the geologic column had not been erected first. Now think about that. What he's saying is we're using the column to help inform the radiometric dating. That is not what we're told. Ever since William Smith at the beginning of the 19th century, fossils have been and still are the best and most accurate method of dating and correlating the rocks in which they occur. And the date of the fossils is made up. Apart from very modern examples, which are really archaeology, I can think of no cases of radioactive decay being used to date fossils. Even the KBS Tough, in the end, after 11 dates, gave way to pig's teeth. In conventional interpretation of potassium-argon age data, it is common to discard ages which are substantially too high or too low compared with the rest of the group or with other available data such as the geologic column. If it doesn't line up with the geologic column, as it doesn't line up with the evolution of man or with the evolution of this animal, we reject it. The geologic column. So the question would be, there are two places where you can find the geologic column in perfect order. The first one is our high school and college textbooks. The second one is the internet. What we're rarely told, if rocks are even dated, the dates are accepted or rejected based on how they compare to the geologic column and evolutionary theory. On the face, this is shocking, but more shocking is how quick a supposed absolute age obtained by radiometric dating is rejected because it doesn't fit the evolutionary model or the geologic column. So now, what is radiometric dating? Great question. I'm going to bring in two scientists to answer the question for us. This is Dr. Jim Mason and Dr. Jonathan Sarfati, or Sarfati, actually.
Many people are of the opinion that scientists can make direct measurements using this technique of billions of years ages for rocks. And they use this then to discredit the history of the Bible. And this is really not the case. The physics behind radiometric dating is relatively straightforward. We have a radioactive element called a parent, which transforms over time into a non-radioactive element called the daughter. And this happens with a characteristic rate referred to as a half-life. That's the length of time that it takes half the parent element to transform into an equal amount of the daughter element. So over time, the amount of parent in the rock decreases and the amount of daughter in the rock increases. Scientists can use very powerful machines to measure either directly the amounts of these two elements or their ratio, and this ratio then can be used in a theoretical calculation along with the half-life to calculate an alleged age for the sample. Let me give you some examples. Radioactive carbon-14 decays to nitrogen-14. Uranium decays to lead. Potassium-40 decays to argon-40. And all of these are used in radiometric dating.
We don't actually measure the age with these methods. We actually are measuring the amount of these isotopes in the rocks or fossils. And it's an interpretation using certain assumptions about these amounts that give us the age. But the age is actually not measured directly.
For many radiometric dating techniques, one of the assumptions is that there is no daughter element present in the rock when it is formed. Which, of course, we can't know unless we're actually there and can take a sample of the rock immediately after it was formed and do an analysis. Now, a small amount of daughter present at the time the rock is formed, if the rock is actually billions of years old, will not have a very significant impact on the calculated age. But if the rock is actually only a few thousand years old, even a very, very tiny amount of daughter present at the time the rock is formed will have a huge impact and give the rock appearances of being billions of years old. Another assumption in radiometric dating is that the rate at which the parent element transforms to the daughter element has been constant over time. Now, this has generally been borne out by experiments in the past, but recently some scientists in the US and Europe determined that the transformation rate of at least some elements, notably cobalt-60, cesium-137, silicon-32, and radium-226, do indeed vary with time. Now, they don't understand why this is, but they have noted that the rate varies with the distance between the Earth and the Sun. Now, the importance of this with respect to radiometric dating is that the assumption that the transformation rate is constant is clearly not true in the short term, and therefore may well be not true in the long term, which of course would invalidate the calculated ages. Some additional evidence for this is an experiment that was spearheaded by the Institute for Creation Research, in which some scientists found zircon crystals with unexpectedly large amounts of helium in them. Now, helium is a byproduct of the decay of uranium-238 to lead-206. And based on the ratio of lead to uranium in these zircon crystals, the calculated radiometric age was 1.5 billion years. But helium escapes from these crystals very quickly, so if the crystals really were 1.5 billion years old, then essentially all of the helium should have escaped. So the large amounts of helium that were found indicate that the crystals can't be 1.5 billion years old, and maybe the transformation from uranium to lead-206 was faster in the past. A third assumption is that the rock has remained a closed system from the time of its formation. What that means is that no parent element or daughter element has been either added to or removed from the rock during its history by any number of potential chemical or physical processes. For radiometric dating to be valid, all of these assumptions must be true. If they are not, the results are not reliable.
Keep in mind, these are used to date igneous or metamorphic rock. As far as limestone, sandstone, and shale, which is where we find most of our fossils, there's no radioactive materials in those rocks. They cannot be dated radiometrically. I think I have this in your handout. These are the half-lives associated with, so potassium-40 turns to argon-40. The half-life, 1.25 billion years. So if you had 100 atoms of potassium-40, in 1.25 billion years, you would statistically have how many atoms? 50, exactly, half that amount. Now again, that is a statistical thing, but you can see these are very long ages. That's the decay chain for uranium-238 to lead. Again, a very long half-life. You can see it there. 4.47 billion years for half of the atoms to convert. And again, this works great in the lab. He talked about the assumptions. You have to know, the assumption normally is the daughter element is 0. If it's not 0, you have to know what it is. We weren't there, we cannot know. All the daughter element present has to be from radioactive decay. You don't know that. The sample was always in a closed environment. It's in an open environment. The starting amount of the parent element is known, where you're estimating the starting amount based on the daughter element present. And the decay rate has always been constant. But the problem really is beyond all this theory. Let me put it in a way that you can understand it, that gets real easy to understand the problem. Basalt from Mount Etna, Sicily, that erupted according to history in 122 BC, dated at 250,000 years old. History said it should be 2,000. It dated 250,000. Lava flow from the 1801 Hawaii volcano erupted, that should be a little over 200 years. 1.6 million years old. Basalt from Kilauea Iki erupted in 1959, 8.5 million years old. Now this is very interesting. This is Sandy and Tori standing on Kilauea Iki that supposedly erupted 8.5 million years ago, and guess what? As I said there, still smoking after 8.5 million years. It had just erupted 60 years ago. Basalt from Mount Etna, Sicily. History told us it erupted in 64, 700,000 years old. This is Sunset Crater, a volcano in Arizona. Tree ring dating tells us that this volcano cleared this area out about 1,000 years ago. Unfortunately, potassium-argon dating tells us it happened 200,000 years ago. This is a lava dome that's been forming in Mount St. Helens since the eruption. So ICR went in and took samples of this lava dome to date it. Now, it was lava in 1980, and it's been doming since then. It came back with a number of different ages, 350,000, 340,000, 900,000, 1.7 million, 2.8 million. This puts it in a way we can easily understand it. We're dating things we know the date of, and we're getting dates that are all over the map. In New Zealand, this volcano, I won't even try to say that name, but it erupts regularly, and Rake took 13 samples. The eruptions were 1949, 1954, 1975, and they sent them off for potassium argon dating. And when you send these off, you have to tell them what date to expect. So what they told them is these should probably be very young. So they didn't give them a date, they just said young. Look at the date range. There's all the samples, 13 rock samples in all, ranging from 270,000 years to 3.5 million years. Apollo moon samples were dated by both uranium, lead, and potassium argon methods. They gave results that ranged from 2 million to 28 billion years old. When was the moon formed? Well, it depends on what rock you look at. This is obviously the Grand Canyon, the northern rim. Lava flows from volcanoes on the north rim of the Grand Canyon, which erupted obviously after the canyon was formed, show potassium argon dates that are 1 billion years older than the basement rock at the bottom of the canyon. Now, how is that possible? So 3 observations from all this, and I'm almost out of time. If the date fits the evolutionary model, they accept it. If the date does not fit the evolutionary model, they reject it. And they don't even have to footnote it. They don't even have to tell you they took 11 dates and only one of them fit. They don't have to say a word. They just tell you the one that fit. But here's the most amazing part. Often they date things they know the ages of and get incorrect dates. But when they date the ages of things they do not know the dates, we are to believe that it's a correct date. Now, does that make any sense to anyone? Is that scientific? The science does not work. And Pastor and I talked about this just a second ago. Add to that, we know that God created with the appearance of age. So when we go and date, now when we date a lava flow that is only 50 years old and it's 1.5 million, that tells us something's wrong in the theory. But when we date something like a moon rock or like the crust of the earth, what date should we get back? If God created with the appearance of age, you see the answer is we don't know what date we should get back. Would it be 6,000, 7,000? Maybe. Or would it be the appearance of age? We just don't simply know. But it doesn't really matter because the science does not work. I hope you can see why I called these 2 lessons the dating game. We are being misled on this whole matter. We're being lied to. And the lie is sort of pernicious in that they don't tell us all the evidence that's contrary to the story. Now, I'm out of time, so I'm going to skip my Bible point tonight to get to Pastor. So, Pastor, come on up.